Hey everyone, welcome back again to another episode of The Followers with myself, John, and Shane. Today we're going to chat to you about supplements that may benefit your health and some of the nuances around those. And we're also going to actually start off with a little bit of answering some questions that came in from last week. There's two of them that kind of stood out that we said we would launch into, so we don't spend too much of today's episode on them. But yeah, so the first one up, I suppose we'll jump right into it. Unless you guys have anything to say. I mean, Shane, you had a very good joke to start last week. Are we good on this? No?
No, I'm all good. You fire away.
Yes, okay. The first one was that we mentioned when discussing whey protein as a supplement last week and the benefits around it. We mentioned animal protein, but we never discussed other protein sources or other sources of protein from, say, plants or supplements, protein supplements from plant sources. So first question, I got this question from numerous different people. Just, is it possible to get enough protein in your diet or to supplement from plant-based or plant sources of protein? And of course, the answer is yes, but it's quite an individual topic that we may discuss on a maybe part of, if not a full podcast in the future. Have you guys anything to throw in with that?
Just first of
No,
all,
I'd agree. I think it definitely. Oh, John, you go.
yeah, first of all, I'm a little bit surprised we have enough listeners to generate questions. That's the first point I want to make. Also, that
List.
it is definitely possible to get enough of the highest quality protein from plants. It'll just take probably an episode on its own because we need to delve in a little bit into amino acids, the various roles they play, and how important they are for just general protein synthesis, recovery, breakdown, everything like that.
Yeah, I think you've covered very well there, Mark. Shane, have you anything to throw in on top?
No, that's spot on. That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah, so it kind of feels like we're kicking it to touch a little, but it does warrant that little bit more of a focus. The very short answer is yes, of course, and hopefully we'll be able to answer that in a lot of detail in time to come. The second question, which was an oversight on our behalf last week when we were discussing nitrates and beetroot juice. So I had a few people asking about how much beetroot juice should you be having to get the benefits from of the nitrates in it, and how often, how long before performance, and then in addition to that, just some other forms of it that may be in a pre-workout, but maybe you could take it by themselves. So first off, it's beetroot juice is a fantastic option. It's not for everyone's taste, as we discussed, but if you are looking to get the benefits of the nitrates in beetroot juice for performance, then from beetroot juice, roughly 2 to 3 hours, depending on what your sport is. If it's a field-based sport, or if if there's a specific window there of maybe an hour, maybe 60 to 90 minutes, possibly having 250 to 500 mil, depending on your body weight. Obviously, if you're a little bit heavy, you might want to have a bit more, a bit lighter, a bit less, to get the benefits of nitrates in your blood for performance. Have any of you two got anything to throw in on top of that, lads? I know, Shane, you love a good beetroot juice.
Yeah, I can't get enough of it. It's definitely not to everyone's taste, like Damien said. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I may be sponsored, but yeah, it's high beetroot or things. But yeah, if beetroot juice isn't to your liking, then other forms that can elicit that nitric oxide benefits would be the one to really look at would be your citrulline malate, and this can be taken in. It comes in a powder. You can have it in addition to a caffeine supplement if you're having that, or even by itself. It's often associated with increasing of a pump, and that's what you might get from some of the pre-workouts that you might pick up around the place. But if you're looking to kind of eliminate the fluff that comes with pre-workouts and have a little bit more control over what you're having, then citrulline malate by itself, anywhere from 4 to 8 milligrams in that range, 45 minutes before performance should result in those benefits as well. So does that kind of cover most of it, or?
Yeah, a lot of pre-workout blends will have a few different things included in them. Like we talked last week about caffeine probably being the most effective, well not probably, it is the most effective thing you're going to take pre-workout, and then they can mix in other supplements in there to say, listen, we've put all the science into blending this perfectly so that it has the right amount. Realistically, those pre-workout blends will put in a lot of caffeine because it's relatively inexpensive. They list off a lot of other ingredients that they suggest are useful for enhancing performance, and then they load it up with whatever is cheapest. Beta-alanine is another one that's quite common in pre-workouts. It's what gives you the tingly feeling in your face, so that really, oh yeah, this pre-workout's working. I'm so buzzed for doing these bicep curls. And realistically, in a short space,
point of the chain anyway.
Realistically, in a short space of time, beta-alanine isn't going to have an impact on your performance. Over 6, 8, maybe 10 weeks, if you're regularly dosing with beta-alanine, it can have an impact then. But in the short space, it's not going to. But that tingly feeling makes you feel like, oh, this is kicking in. I'm so ready to lift. They'll often list off a bunch of branched chain amino acids as well, or even just say a blend of branched chain amino acids. You think, oh yeah, it's going to have me recovering before I ever start lifting here. Just try and market it really well. But realistically, what has the impact is caffeine, number 1, citrulline malate, and nitrates probably 2 and 3, or 2A and 2B. After that, probably not having much of an impact.
Yeah, and again, on that, usually as kind of a rule of thumb, if it's a good pre-workout, if it's a good quality pre-workout, it will list the individual dosages for those different things. It will have an individual figure for citrulline malate alone, it'll have an individual figure for beta-alanine, whereas it just says proprietary blend or new blend, you should probably be dubious and maybe think twice about getting it.
Yeah, that's the famous term, the proprietary blend. If they're not saying what the proprietary blend consists of or how much of everything is in it, you can be fairly sure they've just lumped in whatever is cheapest.
Sawdust.
Yeah, well, doesn't blend that well, I found.
So that's us not being sponsored by any supplement company out of the way. Yeah, that kind of nails it, does it? We're pretty much up to date. So again, thanks for everyone who did actually drop a message with some questions or some feedback again. It's much appreciated. To our surprise that people are watching and listening. Probably puts a little bit more pressure on us to actually not talk complete nonsense. But yeah.
We also had a good news of our IT guy here finally getting us up on Spotify after 5 weeks of trying.
Here, round of applause. Shane.
Good work, Jamie.
Yeah, so that was our big news during the week, finally getting to Spotify, and hopefully we'll be on a few more podcast hosting platforms in the next couple of weeks.
Nice one. Pull that up, Jamie. Pull that up.
On that point, it probably brings us to our main topic today then, where we'll be looking at, so last week we looked at supplements performance. Today we want to look at supplements for health. This is not going to be supplements for health, the definitive guide, because you can't really do that. Supplements for health are obviously going to be very dependent on the individual person, what their diet is like, any potential pre-existing conditions they may have there. Realistically, you're probably going to need to get some blood work done or have a reasonably in-depth analysis of your diet done before you go digging into what supplements for health should I take. Some people may throw out saying, oh, everyone should really be taking this. Very hard to say definitively unless we know exactly what you're eating, what your blood looks like, and what potential, I suppose, symptoms you could call them, you may notice in someone, or where they're feeling lacking in something, and then dig a bit deeper into that. We'll just give a general overview today of ones that tend to work for most people, just based on the diet in Ireland and in Western culture, and kind of, I suppose, because the latitude we actually live at, it's going to influence it quite a bit as well. So We'll start off today with looking at some vitamin D, why it's important, what kind of dosage we look at, and what it links to otherwise. So I suppose one of the ways that really was brought to light for us was, Damien, you did a project on osteoporosis back when we were in college, and vitamin D jumped out quite a bit to you there. Now, I always thought osteoporosis was about the bones, but why would vitamin D be important there?
Well, it is. It is incredibly important for our bones, and I suppose with vitamin D, I suppose if we're speaking about bone health, we can't speak about bone health without mentioning calcium, which we'll touch on again after this. But yeah, the research that I actually had been looking into at the time was to do with early onset osteoporosis in late 20-year-old females. So much earlier, something like osteoporosis is commonly found in people in their their 50s and 60s, moving on that way as we age. However, there was a little bit of there was a significant rise in the frequency of it being seen in women in their late 20s, and a lot of this was linked back into fad diets, restrictive diets, around different diet cultures that they may have picked up during teenage years. And I suppose one of the important things with this to note is that our calcium and vitamin D together does support a linear bone growth, and it contributes to building up our bone density, which by the time we get to the age of 18 to 21, in that range, we'll have kind of we'll have created somewhere in the region of 90% of our peak bone density for life. So if during those important years you either don't have sufficient vitamin D, you're not consuming enough calcium and absorbing enough calcium in your diet, which is where vitamin D plays a huge role. So vitamin D is responsible for helping us to absorb calcium. So that's the connection between those two. Insufficient levels of vitamin D, naturally enough, then will mean that we're not going to be able to absorb enough calcium. I suppose our sources of vitamin D would be, our number one source would be the sun, which while we live in this beautiful isle, we tend not to see too much sunlight. So you do want to be getting in, and vitamin D is something we do need on a daily basis. It's not something we can kind of get in on at the start of the week and Bob's your uncle there and off you go. It is something we do need to get in sufficient levels of on a daily basis, so we do absorb enough calcium in our diet on a day-to-day basis. So on that note, if you are looking to get it from the sun, you would want to have about half your body out in direct sunlight for at least 15 minutes per day. That's obviously enough. We may not get 15 minutes of sunlight, and if we do, chances are we're in an office, in a house, we're wearing or too much of our body is covered in clothing, so we don't necessarily get in the amount that we're looking for. We can get vitamin D from our diet in limited capacity. So I suppose some sources of vitamin D could be your oily fish, egg yolks have small amounts of, and then some fortified foods, like you come across dairy products with vitamin D added to it and that. However, I don't, from what I can see, we don't seem to be getting the full benefit that we thought we would get from fortified foods with vitamin D. And because of where we live, it is highly recommended that we should supplement with vitamin D on a daily basis. This has become even more prominent during, I suppose, the COVID lockdown or pandemic, where research reviews coming out of, actually Trinity was one of the leaders with reviewing this research, just the importance that of vitamin D on protecting and aiding our respiratory system as well. So from that perspective, and from the perspective of needing sufficient levels of vitamin D to absorb calcium on a daily basis, it has been recommended and is recommended that we should supplement somewhere between 1,000 and 5,000 international units per day.
Before we go into looking at the amounts we should supplement with, you just mentioned there absorbing calcium. What other vitamins or minerals is it important for absorbing that we need a certain amount of vitamin D in our body for?
So I presume do you mean like with iron or anything like that, is it? Or yeah, so it does help us to absorb quite a bit when it comes to iron as well. So calcium is the number one that we do look to, but we do also have to keep in mind that it does aid in iron absorption as well, which is massively important, especially for, I suppose, your girls who are going through girls or women who are going through their menstrual cycle, that they have much more of a requirement and demand for producing red blood cells, which iron is directly linked with and directly contributes towards. So it's important that it's not only important that we consume enough iron in our diet, but that we're able to actually absorb it and increase absorption of that from our food. So these things are all combined, possibly, were all possible contributors towards that that dive into why there was such a prominence in early onset osteoporosis in women at such a young age, from mid to late 20s, there where you otherwise would not expect it to be.
Also, you said there on
I think a good point on that is, with a lot of especially kind of women, a lot of them would have focused on things like bone density. Like a lot of people would have either really tried to get their calcium intake in or taken a calcium supplement, because I'm not sure whether to credit to the government or kind of the dairy industry, but it was quite at the forefront, especially like when we were younger, that get your calcium in, it's good for your bones, good for your strength. And that is true. It's just, it was never really mentioned that you need vitamin D to absorb that. So it's a package deal, and it was very well advertised and recommended for one part of it. But unfortunately, you can't get one without the other. So you get the calcium in, but you can't actually get it into your body. So it's very important. That's why a lot of that early onset osteoporosis, it'd be something that people wouldn't necessarily think they might have, because they've been so good at, maybe they do have a good diet or they were focusing on their calcium intake. So it wasn't something they were worried about. And unfortunately, then you only really diagnose it or it comes to the front when there's something like a bone break or something like that. So it's one that a lot of people might either suffer from or be in early stages of it without noticing, because they think they've been quite good about it.
Just on sunlight there as well, because vitamin D is known as the sunshine vitamin, that you were saying you probably need half your body exposed to sun, and realistically it's not generally that conducive in Ireland to going around topless, bar the odd really warm day when we tend to get way too much vitamin
Speak for
D.
yourself.
Yeah, we tend to get way too much vitamin D, and I know gingers like myself come in a completely different skin shade afterwards. So if I were to go out and take my proper skincare protocols and put on factor 50 or factor 90 as I did in a really hot summer in Chicago because I was so worried, is that going to impact my ability to absorb vitamin D?
Was factor 90 a t-shirt, Murph, just out of curiosity?
Yes. So to put it very very bluntly, yes. You want to have you want your skin to have to synthesize vitamin D from the sun unrestricted. So that's why I mentioned 15 minutes just of direct sunlight. Obviously enough, that does sound like it goes massively against guidelines for skin care and prevention of skin cancer. However, it is 15 minutes. It's only 15 minutes, and where the mistake people often make is that 15 minutes means going out and lying down in the sun, and then it's 3 hours later, and they still have no cream on, or going out and about, maybe kicking around or going for a walk, or whatever it might be, that it doesn't get limited to that 15 minutes. So yeah, under extreme conditions like that there you mentioned, Murph, with being over in the Chicago sun, that 15 minutes in the early morning, direct sunlight would have been fine, and then for the rest of the day then have sufficient levels of skin protection on. So yeah, it can disrupt our ability to synthesize.
And one of the most well-known researchers in vitamin D is Professor Graham Close in England. And I had heard him say that just there are actually different types of sunlight that can impact it, particularly in times of year and the tilt of the axis to the earth and all like that. But that a kind of a general rule of thumb is that if your shadow is longer than yourself, you're not really getting the benefits of vitamin D there, just because of the tilt of the earth, the distance it has to pass, distance the sunlight has to pass through, that we don't really get the full vitamin D benefits. Others who need to be quite conscious is those with dark skin. I don't really mean those who just tan quite quickly, but those of African descent will really struggle to get vitamin D benefits and need to be very conscious of supplement, particularly if they've moved from being near the equator where they have more sunlight, like how their ancestors have evolved to move further and further away from the sun, but their skin color hasn't really changed with it yet. That they need to be very conscious of vitamin D supplementation, just because they don't have the sunlight exposure that their bodies were designed for. That probably brings us on then to how much we need to supplement with, and different sources of getting, we touched on it there in food, but realistically, to get the right amounts, you probably need to supplement. So how much are we looking at per day?
I suppose the recommended dosages are from the safe dosages are from like 1 to 4 or 5,000 international units. They seem to be that seems to be very safe, but to get the benefits, just from a public health perspective, 1,000 international units is sufficient. However, you can pick up from pretty much most online sports supplement stores. You can pick up a simple little tablet that you can take easily in each day that should have somewhere between 2 and 5,000 international units. So if you're in that range, then you've nothing to worry about. You don't need to worry about getting up towards that top end. If you're having, that 1,000 to 2,500 international units per day, you should be perfectly fine. There should be no reason to go above that, unless for some reason that you find from, like you mentioned, Murph, at the outset with blood work, that you're very low in it, and then in that case you should be speaking to your doctor or your dietitian or something like that to see if you should be going for a higher dose or not. But in general, if you're in that 1,000 to 2,000, 2,500 international units per day, you should be good. And
is there a danger of going above that?
Necessarily. On one given day, it probably not. However, chronic intake over a period of time could lead to issues. However, what is classed as chronic, or what the danger limit is, varies varies amongst the research. There's some research out there that have gone up as far at looking at as far as 80,000 international units, and not found it to be of an issue. I do know that you can get a full week of an intake as well in one go from different medical sources. So it differs, but it would be over a long period of time. If you happen to go over it a little bit in one day, I wouldn't worry about it too much. But in general, just sticking to that 1,000 to 2,500 international units in that range per day is sufficient, and I wouldn't suggest going anywhere above that, as you'll have listed the benefits from that already. And just to kind of consume that with it is a fat soluble vitamin as well. So just to kind of not to be just having it with water in the morning, maybe having it with a meal or something like that with your breakfast. If you're drinking a back of water, fine, but have it in around your breakfast as well.
The good point on that is if you do supplement with that kind of 2,000 IU, you're not going to overeat on vitamin D then after that. So if you supplement for the full amount for the day, you're not going to eat 3, 4, 5 times that through your diet regularly. So it's not going to be something you have to concern on that front. It would only be if you're taking 3-4 times the recommended amount of the supplement, it would be in danger of going over. But it's not something you have to worry about if you are just regularly taking 1 tablet per day. It's not something then you'd have to watch the intake of your diet through the rest of the day.
Just when we said there on vitamin D being important for the absorption of other vitamins and minerals, particularly calcium, but you also mentioned iron. Is iron something we may look to, just briefly touch on this, but is that something we may look to supplement with of itself? And if so, why?
It'd be mainly women or people who don't eat meat or dairy who would need to focus on an iron supplement. But it's something, again, I don't know if it would be something I'd recommend for someone who doesn't have blood work to support an iron deficiency. So again, taking too much iron isn't going to have any superior benefits for your performance or your general health, whereas it would just be if you have a deficiency, it's going to bring it back. So that would be the case with most vitamins. So they're never going to increase your performance, increase your health, unless you're deficient, in which case a deficiency will greatly affect your life. So you'll kind of have feelings of fatigue, things like that. But it will be something that's prominent in people who don't eat a lot of meat and women as well.
You said there in people who don't eat a lot of meat, but isn't there quite a bit of iron suggested in some vegetables such as broccoli, spinach, all like that? Can you get enough in from those?
You definitely could, but it's going to be a lot more difficult. So it's a lot less readily available, the iron that comes from kind of leafy greens, as opposed to meats, where it's just a lot easier for the body to process. So again, you are getting the iron numbers in, but that's why it's so important to get that blood work to reflect it. So you can be getting so much iron in through kind of a diet that's rich in spinach, broccoli, things like that. But if your body's not absorbing it, then you're not getting the benefits of the iron, regardless of the other benefits you're getting from eating so many leafy greens. But it's definitely something that I would tell any vegan or vegetarian clients that I'd have. It's something we definitely look at and make sure get blood work for it.
And it's also a good idea too when trying to make the iron in green leafy vegetables more absorbable, to include some vitamin C with those, as it does make the iron a little bit more absorbable from those foods. Other things to kind of keep in mind as well, where iron deficiency may be something to kind of think about, or maybe kind of go and seek out that blood work, is because it plays a direct role in our nervous system. So like iron deficiency can be associated with things like fatigue and impaired immunity, you know, and this can, especially for teenagers, like you mentioned, Shane, with your teenage girls or women, you know, going through their menstrual cycles, this can be an issue. But also then with teenagers who may be partaking in quite a significant amount of sport, that you know, if it is quite common with athletic teenagers that they're not just involved in one sport, they're involved in several, and they can be out almost every day of the week, which may be a case that if you start to notice fatigue or like growth or developmental you know, things taking place, like, you know, that you're not growing to the same level as your peers or whatnot, or if you happen to notice, if you're watching this and you have a teenager at home, you notice that they don't seem to be growing as much, they seem to be fatigued quite a lot, they find focus is quite an issue, and that it may result in poor school attendance or even poor focus or attentiveness when in school, that maybe that could be as a result, despite that, you know, that they take part in a lot of sport. It could be worth then looking into possible blood work to check out if there is an iron deficiency there, as this could be causing all that. They may not just be lazy, as is often cited amongst teenagers, that it could actually be something like that.
Yeah, just anecdotally, I would have noticed quite a bit, just in my day job in an all-girls school, you would notice anemia being quite, not popular, but it is common in quite a few. You mentioned there then it's worth taking vitamin C along with iron to try and absorb the most from it. So what are possibly some of the benefits of vitamin C that are generally reported, whether accurately or not, some of them?
Well, I suppose vitamin C seems to be connected with a lot. Like it seems to, anecdotally, as you said, be able to prevent the common cold or flu. This, however, is kind of this is more of a possible placebo effect than anything else. As vitamin C won't cure a cold. You know, it's not going to cure flu. Same ways, it's not going to cure you of COVID or prevent you getting it. So yeah, vitamin C does get kind of attached to anything that if you're feeling in any way low, vitamin C, get that orange juice into you. You know, load up. But from that perspective, like it makes the iron more readily available in green leafy vegetables. But however, we're not really at risk of developing scurvy anymore. So where vitamin C was found to be directly connected to you know a clear cure for that disease, but yeah, it does get connected with so much kind of questionable conversation.
Yeah, just on vitamin C and scurvy there, why like as I suppose doing bits of research in science, it's kind of been famed as the first randomized controlled trial, whereas they're wondering why people who went sailing, because sailing was the main means of transport, particularly going from England to Asia to bring back spices, take over land, whatever they were doing, that an awful lot of sailors tend to develop scurvy. So there was 6 boats going off, and 3 of them they gave lemons and lemon juice to bring with them and tell everyone to take just a small bit of lemon juice every day, and the other 3 just continued as normal. And the 3 that came back that had the lemon juice did not have 1 case of scurvy on any of them, whereas the other 3 had the same amounts of scurvy as normal. So that was the kind of first randomized controlled trial. So yes, vitamin C, or well, at the time it was just lemon juice worked really well, and then as science further developed, they realized that it was the vitamin C in those lemons that was stopping the scurvy. To stop scurvy, we only need quite a small amount. I think it's 80 milligrams a day, whereas those effervescent tablets of 1,000 milligrams, I think we're in around the figure of, is it 280 milligrams a day we're actually able to absorb. So those 1,000 milligram tablets are really good for just change the color of our pee and making you feel like you have that placebo effect. And like we touched on some of the reported benefits of it there, that if you have a cold, dose yourself with vitamin C. Like realistically, it's not having an effect, because colds and flus are viral. They're more of a stress response than anything else, and vitamin C isn't going to reduce the amount of stress in your life. Whereas being conscious that I need to sit down with this warm cup of water or with a pint of vitamin C in it and just take a bit of time to rest, realistically, that's what's having the impact in your flu going away or your cold going away, along with just time in general and drinking more liquids, as opposed to vitamin C actually having that magic curing effect.
Aye, Captain.
It's actually kind of, vitamin C is in a lot more things than we think as well. So it's used, not predominantly, but one of the main uses it's used for like flavor extracts. For like, you'd be surprised how many things would have lime extract, orange extract, lemon extract in it. So you get, again, that base, as you said, Murph, the base is very low, but you need to get it in. So most people would get in at least enough to avoid scurvy from nearly any diet kind of across the board. So it's not really as much of a problem as it was when we were sailing to China.
Yeah. Just if someone is really concerned with vitamin C, and from blood work it has shown that they are quite deficient in it, that can be, there are a few things that stop us absorbing it, or it's not the most robust of vitamins, in that, like a can of chopped tomatoes, you say, has loads of vitamin C in it, but unfortunately the process of canning, because to tin something or to can something, you have to heat it. You actually kill all the vitamin C or destroy it, so it's not available to us afterwards. The same if you're taking your pint of water with a vitamin C tab in it, along with a mug of coffee in the morning, caffeine actually stops the absorption of vitamin C as well, so you're not really absorbing any of that, or the bare minimum of it. Same if you're having quite a high fiber breakfast, like if it's a bowl of bran flakes or whatever like that, that's also going to slow or prevent the absorption of vitamin C there as well. So even thinking, I have this now with my breakfast, with my mug of coffee and bowl of bran flakes, I'm going to be buzzing on vitamin C for the day. You're probably not even taking in any of it there at that stage, or at least a very, very small amount. That's something to be conscious of as well. Another vitamin that's worth looking at is fish oils, particularly omega-3 fish oils. Why might they be beneficial? You see them recommended a lot.
Well, I suppose one of the reasons that they are recommended as much as they are is, I suppose, is due to the lack of omega-3 that tends to be found in our diet. So like DHA is often how you see it if it's on a supplement or packaging. Basically, we can get sufficient levels of omega-3 in our diet through eating the likes of oily fish and that, you know, 2 to 3 times a week. However, for a lot of people, this isn't an option, and as a result, or if it's not an option, maybe it's just something that oily fish might be something that they look to get in, you know, that they only get in maybe once every fortnight or once every 3 weeks or something like that, so they don't get insufficient levels. But where we do happen to find it quite easy to get omega-6 into our diet, as we can get this from, you know, eggs, meat, different things like that. We tend to get that in that way quite sufficiently. But omega-3s, as I said, we don't, which is why you often see, especially dairy products, fortified with omega-3. You see milks and different things like that, and you plaster all over them, or cereals as well. Some cereals will have fortified omega-3 in them as well. So it's shown to aid in our the health of our brain and our cardiovascular system, so our heart health. With research showing that supplementing of omega-3, even down as young as, you know, 9-month-old babies, there's research showing an improvement in cognition and a reduction in the likes of systolic blood pressure. So you know that basically you have those two benefits to your brain and your cardiovascular system there from children that young, supplementing with it. So that's why they're the two main reasons that it's pushed so much and that it's discussed so much, is that it can have very positive long-term health implications for inclusion.
I think
I'd agree with that. They're especially important for the makeup of the brain. The brain is mainly made of kind of fatty tissue, and like it's been shown to be very good for cognition. The only main thing I'll talk about with omega-3 supplements is there can be a very big difference in quality of the omega supplement depending on the brand. So it's one supplement that I recommend people do spend a bit of money on, just to make sure that you're getting a quality supplement, because there is a lot of bad versions out there, for lack of a better word.
I think the main recommendation around omega-3s is that ideally in our body we should have a 1:1 ratio of omega-6 to omega-3, because we don't eat much oily fish and just don't get it in naturally, I suppose, from our food. We end up with a 4:1, even a 6:1 omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. Now, it has been suggested that imbalance ratio leads to inflammation in the body, but that's just something that tends to be thrown out quite a bit. Say, inflammation in the body. That's an episode in and of itself to dig into a bit deeper. Ideally, you will get your omega-3 from fatty fish, such as salmon, mackerel, sardines, whatever like that. It is quite surprising in Ireland that we don't get more fish, particularly fatty fish in general, and that we have such a long coastline. We're never more than 2 hours, even an hour and a half from an actual coast. We have a long tradition of not eating meat on a Friday, so that, you know, the option there is to eat fish, but for some reason we just don't seem to eat near as much of it. Now, that being said, some of the fish that was eaten on Friday, your Donegal catch, you're probably not getting much omega-3 from that, or your pack of Captain Fish Finger there with his his breaded cod, or what suggested is cod. You're probably not getting a whole pile from that. So that's why it would be better if we were getting it from our actual food, but otherwise supplement with omega-3. The last one we'll touch on then is a multivitamin. Some people suggest it is the greatest thing ever, whereas others would have a little bit more of a critical view and ask the question, is it necessary? What say either of you?
Well, necessary is a very strong word. I suppose a simple answer for that is anybody who's seen a benefit from a multivitamin supplement is probably maybe deficient in one, maybe two vitamins. and that's what they're seeing the benefit from. Like, it's not by getting all these vitamins together, they come together and become like a megatron of a vitamin that makes you a better person. Like, it's going to be just getting an all-encompassing pill instead of finding out what is exactly wrong with you and what you need to supplement specifically. So again, there'd be a few benefits, obviously, that if it is like, it will have your iron or it will have vitamin D, things that we say that you should supplement. But from another point of view, it's just going to be much more expensive than actually just supplementing them individually. And at least if you do go through the trouble of getting blood work done, you know what you're deficient in, and it could be as simple as changing a little thing in your diet rather than just going, all right, I'll just paper over the cracks for now. Multivitamin seems to be doing a job at the moment, and then I'll just ignore what could be the root of a bigger problem. So it seems like it does have its benefits, but it's definitely not necessary. A lot of it could be just a placebo, to be perfectly honest. What do you think, Damon?
Yeah, I agree completely, and it is something that is treated very much like, you know, a plaster over a bullet wound. Like, oh, you know, I'll just take my multivitamin and everything is all right. But whereas you like you said, you'd be much better off finding out what you're deficient in. If you are noticing something, getting some blood work done, seeing what you may or may not be deficient in, and then trying to approach those individual things. Another thing to remember too is that all multivitamins are not created equal. And a quick look through the ingredients, you'll see, you know, plenty of information, but if you don't actually understand what you're looking for, then you don't really know if you're getting enough in that multivitamin of what it is that you're looking for, or what it is that you think is a good amount to have in, so or to be getting into your day-to-day diet. So while there shouldn't really be any harm with having a multivitamin in general, you could almost look at it almost like if you link it back to the vitamin C tablets, you know, the effervescent tablets, where you'll probably see majority of the ingredients due to the concentration of it and your body's inability to absorb everything in one go like that, it'll probably come out in your piss. So sorry, that probably should have been worded a little bit better, but yeah, it can be looked at as you can see it coming out of you, and that's why I mentioned we mentioned with before, like, or what we discussed around hydration. You know, taking a look at, you know, the color of your pee may not necessarily be a good way to know if you're hydrated if you happen to take one of those vitamin C effervescent tablets or a multivitamin, because the two of those will result in your pee coming out much darker in color. Whereas if you were to approach your deficiency, and this should always be the case from any perspective, as I know we're discussing last week and this week on supplements, but in general, you should always approach any deficiency or anything that you're trying to get on top of from a food first perspective. And you should be able to, for majority of people, you should be able to get in enough vitamins and minerals, protein, the whole lot, from your food. So this should be your first point of call, your first port of call. And if you can't address it through your food, then you can start to look down the supplement route. But just going, kind of getting a multivitamin and kind of slapping it on there and going like, that'll sort it all out, that's not necessarily fixing the issue. It's not fixing maybe the gaps that might exist in your diet. And long term, you may not actually be able to absorb sufficient levels of whatever it is that you're deficient in from that multivitamin. So I think that kind of summarizes my views on a multivitamin. No harm in it, but if it's your go-to, if it's your first port of call to try and address an issue, whatever it might be, then I think you're kind of looking, you're missing the wood from the trees a little bit.
I think it's also, people use it to validate bad diet decisions a lot of times. Like, a lot of times you ask people, you're like, do you get your 5 a day? And they're like, no, but should I take a multivitamin? It's grand. Well, it's not grand. Like, that defeats the whole purpose. You're not just having fruits and vegetables because they get your baselines for vitamins and minerals. There's so much more to it than that. So it's almost seen as an easy out than actually focusing on your diet, when it should be
the other way around. You should focus on your diet, and then if there is anything you're missing, that's when supplementation should come in. But the whole time it should be 95% about diet rather than the other way around.
Yeah, I think that sums it up nicely. Just 2 points to finish off on. Damien, before we started recording, you mentioned an app you found particularly useful the last couple of weeks.
Oh yeah, so just just if you're looking for some audiobooks or some books for your Kindle or to read on laptop or whatever, I subscribe to Scribd. It's called CRIBD. I think it costs like €7.50 or €8 a month, and you kind of have like unlimited downloads. You can also kind of access different research papers on there. Like basically, there's a whole pile of stuff. There's audiobooks, books, articles, journals, the whole lot up there, and you're not really restricted in what you can download from it or access on it. So I find it to be quite beneficial. They're just for, as I said, for all those areas, and there's a huge amount of stuff on it. So I find it, yeah, I think it's pretty cool, to be honest.
Good. Yeah, I think our main take-home point then on supplements for health is it should have a specific purpose. You should look at your diet and possibly blood work first before you actually look to take anything and see, is it going to have a specific benefit to me and any particular deficiency I may have? Could I sort that out through diet first? And if not, for whatever reason, then you may look to a supplement. But supplements should not necessarily be your first protocol, whether it be for performance, like we said last week, or for health. If you have any questions on today, please just drop them in the description. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll see our social media handles on graphics, stuff like that. We'll put them in the description box now that we're on Spotify as well. And next week, we're going to look to answer the question that we've gotten a few times. How do we come up with the name of the followers, and why is there a picture of an old guy with glasses in all of our pictures?
Probably give some background into each one of us as well. Maybe if we can get to it, if time allows.
Lovely. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'd appreciate any and all feedback.